Hey you guys, I found this. I found this article. I thought it was New York Times, but it was Rolling Stone. This is such a great article. I'm going to read some of it for you. Because first, one thing they talk about Trump and they call Trump. This get female strangers aren't the only ones in Washington who think he's weird about Miller. Over the years of their close working relationship, President Trump, ever the gossipy mean girl with the nuclear arsenal, has not shied away from insulting Miller behind his back. According to two sources with direct knowledge of the matter, Trump has commented to others in the past about Miller's intense, awkward, and at times off-putting demeanor. But to Trump, Miller is a useful battering ram, the policy answer to his lingering question of, where's my Roy Cohn? That's true. So it talks about like right after November 5th and how they were all at the Hilton waiting to call for the election to be called, and he was over there. And amid the revelry, Miller huddled with other high-ranking Trump personnel and said his thank yous to the ad hoc procession of euphoric conservative voters and GOP bigwigs who congratulated him over and over. They could all see it wasn't just Trump's victory that night, it was Miller's, and many felt obliged to kiss his Trump-endowed ring. True, to see the expression of unbridled joy written across Miller's face, I'd like to see that, at the moment of Trump's restoration, was to stare into the eyes of someone who could see the future. Trump's top advisor, his most faithful believer, the one close aide who had somehow survived the countless purges of MAGA officials in the first term, knew the country was now his. Speaking to one overjoyed woman, Miller said, "It's gonna be great." More than 7 months into Trump's second term, Stephen Miller has become America's, if not the world's, most powerful unelected bureaucrat. With Trump's blessing, Miller has been allowed to run and remake the country in a manner virtually unheard of for a U.S. government official of his rank. Think of any egregious policy from the Trump administration, chances are it was driven by Stephen Miller. Under Miller's guiding hand, the government can deport or kidnap and rendition you or your spouse without due process to a foreign gulag if the president feels like it. The White House can repeatedly threaten to take away your most basic of constitutional protections, such as habeas corpus. The president can launch Justice Department criminal investigations into his enemies who, by all accounts, did nothing wrong except annoy the commander-in-chief or refuse to help him steal an election. The president and his lieutenants can arrest you at a routine courthouse check-in, at your church, outside your kid's school, even if you have no criminal record. They've instituted a heavily draconian system of immigration arrest quotas, ensuring a regime not mainly of mass deportation, but of mass disappearance, mass incarceration, and indefinite detention in jails and newly erected camps. And all of those newly erected camps, all of those government contracts with those people, those are all big private prison donors. Trump's buddies. They've quickly turned much of federal law enforcement into a masked, nameless, unaccountable secret police working at the whims of the president and his staff. The president can deploy armed National Guard troops, even U.S. Marines, to the streets of an American city anytime he wants, and deem enemy territory. This administration has made censoring media organizations, comedians, and aging rock stars a policy priority in an anti-free speech crusade waged from the West Wing to the Federal Communications Commission. Shadow SecDef, Prime Minister Miller, the real Attorney General, the DH boss, the DHS boss, President Miller. Trump administration officials and other Republicans close to the president in this White House are paranoid that Miller will one day hear them gossiping about him behind his back, but they still whisper the unofficial titles and nicknames that they bestow onto the White House Deputy Chief of Staff. When Rolling Stone asks one senior administration official about former Fox News star and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, this source says, unprompted, that he does what Stephen Miller wants him to do. And that I wanted to bring this up because during the first administration, Miles Taylor, who was there for a little while, he was just talking about how during the first administration, Miller wanted to bomb those boats that Hegseth is now bombing. That's what he wanted to do. And they had to walk that shit. It was so fucking illegal and unconstitutional, all that shit. He wanted to, though. That was one of his secret wishes. So now that it's happening, and we know from an unprompted person, he does what Stephen wants him to do. Yeah. Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell said that Hegseth enjoys a great working relationship with Stephen Miller. They're completely aligned on carrying out President Trump's America First agenda. So, as a teenager in Santa Monica, Miller craved nothing more than triggering the good-looking kids in school who wanted nothing to do with him. Jason Islas, who first met Miller at Lincoln Middle School in Santa Monica, said he and Miller and a third grade friend were a tight-knit band of outsiders who spent middle school doing preteen boy stuff, like talking about Star Trek. Islas remembers Miller as a big Captain Kirk fan. That all changed, though, in the summer of 1999, between 8th and ninth grades, when, Islas says, Miller informed him they couldn't be friends anymore. One of the things he did say was that he didn't like the fact that I'm of Latin heritage, Islas recalls. In the decades that follow, Miller did not grow, except to become more hardened in his extremist views. When he worked as a communications aide in the office of Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions during the Obama years, he was so widely disliked by his conservative colleagues on Capitol Hill that Republican staff in other offices would invent or spread malicious rumors about Miller, such as he liked to play with porcelain dolls. A White House official insists that any such characterization of his time on the Hill is inaccurate and baseless gossip. The staffers at the time never dreamed that he'd ever amount to much more than a punchline or an obscure cautionary tale of what happens when you read too many far-right hate websites and dive into Washington's most feverish swamps. Yeah, not much has changed. Even today, not much has changed. As the president's policy architect and enforcer, he is obsessed, according to three Trump advisors, with deploying the might of the government to stamp out what he deems anti-white hatred and anti-white racism and anti-white discrimination, no matter the cost. Miller speaks almost exclusively in apocalyptic terms and it caricatures language of military combat, forever war, and invasion against the culture and the homeland. He's yearned to erect a vast, hyper-militarized network of what he's dubbed camps for detention and mass deportation, a network he hopes will change the American political and physical landscape forever. Miller, who is Jewish, has been denounced by his own uncle as a one-man betrayal of Jewish moral and political values. Miller has long held the deepest admiration for the Immigration Act of 1924 and wishes to bring America back to those days. That law, of course, is notorious for making the Holocaust deadlier for Jews who tried to flee the Nazis only to be denied safe passage into the U.S. That's why we say never again. We will never deny safe passage to others. Miller is the one. Miller is the one that is behind all of these draconian things. Miller may be the avatar of the anonymous racist internet troll brought to agonizing life and imbued with power, but that does not mean he doesn't thoroughly believe in this righteousness of the ideology he's selling. In his mind, he's the triumphant hero, a one-man antidote to liberalism and a holy warrior against the permissive legal and illegal against the permissive legal and illegal immigration that has left him and his peers feeling mugged by pluralistic reality. Talk to Republicans operating at the highest levels of Trumpville, and you get a unique mix of admiration and unease when you ask them what they think about Miller. One intense motherfucker, a longtime Trump advisor notes. Even attempts by his friends to make him sound gentler, kinder, or funnier often fall flat, making him seem like a crank or the meanest dork you've ever met. For instance, multiple longtime Miller associates say the top White House aide is one of the most maha people you'll ever meet and has plunged headlong into Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s style food and health, or anti-health, agitprop. Accounts of his social life make him sound, to put it gently, tedious. Female strangers aren't the only ones in Washington who think he's weird. Hit on by a premarital Miller circa 2017 at a bar not far from DuPont Circle. Grilled about which country was named on the collar of her clothing, don't say China, and getting accused of being a globalist because she wasn't the right kind of conservative. Oh my God. But to Trump, Miller is a useful battering ram